Right at the start, I want to warn you that there will be spoilers in this video for the first 4 issues of the new Darth Vader comic series from Marvel, so if you haven't read them yet and plan to, and don't want the story ruined, now would be a good time to stop the video and come back another time. And now let me say that overall, I've not been a huge fan of most of the new Star Wars comics from Marvel, which is really disappointing to have to say because I was very excited about Marvel getting the rights to Star Wars back and what they were going to do with it. And I'd have to say one of the biggest issues I've had with them is that instead of just trying to tell good stories and use characters only when and where needed, they seem to instead take characters and just try to find stories to tell about them. And all too often, it's not a great story or one that does anything for the character. The best example of this was probably the Chewbacca series, which was, to be as kind as I can, not very good or interesting. It just felt like they told someone who barely knew the character and cared about him even less to write a story about Chewbacca. I also don't like that the main Star Wars series, which is now 32 issues into its run, is still stuck between episodes 4 and 5, when I really think it's time to move on. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I don't want to think that Luke, Han, and Leia had a million harrowing adventures in the 3-year time period between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. But anyway, I really just wanted to give you a quick overview of what I've thought of these comics so far before I talk about the new Darth Vader book and what it has or hasn't done for perhaps the greatest villain of all time, and what I think about the story of how he obtained the Kyber crystal to make his first, and as far as we know only, red lightsaber he's ever had. And one thing I do like is that we learn more about how Sith make their lightsabers, and that it does line up with what we've learned about them in the Ahsoka novel, and that is that Sith have to find Kyber crystals, which are living in a sense, and corrupt them by pouring their pain into them until they bleed and take on the color of rage, which is of course red. And in the first story arc, that picks up right where Revenge of the Sith ended, we learn that Palpatine's first task to Vader is to create his own lightsaber. But in order to do that, he has to find a Jedi and take it from them, and to find that Jedi, Vader accesses the archives of a Jedi way station, killing many of his 501st troopers in the process, who were there cataloging the contents of that station. And he learns of a Jedi named infil'a, who has taken the Barash vow, which means he has separated himself from the Order and lived alone within the Force until his true path reveals itself to him, though we don't really learn why he's taken this vow. We also learn that Kurik's only true purpose within the Order was to fight. And when he finally encounters Kurik, Vader is at first bested by him and force pushed off a cliff, which Kurik thinks has of course killed him, but it doesn't, and a determined Vader comes back for more, and this time Vader threatens to kill some innocent bystanders, and when Kurik acts to save them, this is when Vader makes his move, takes Kurik's saber, and promptly ends his life, and that's where the story ends for now. Now, overall, I thought this was a pretty good story and a decent start to the second volume of Vader comic books, and I'm guessing there are many people that think Luke has also taken this Barash vow, and that's why he's left everyone and everything behind to go to that island, but something tells me that won't be the case, and that this comic and the vow will have nothing to do with why Luke left and what he's doing at the First Jedi Temple. That's not to say it wouldn't be an interesting idea, I just don't think that's something that's going to be spoiled in any way, shape, or form in a comic book. And one thing I wish this comic would have showed us is maybe a shred of doubt in Vader about what he has become and what he's doing, because this comic takes place literally days after the events of Revenge of the Sith and his turn to the dark side. And I know one complaint people have about Revenge of the Sith is that Anakin seemed to turn pretty much instantaneously, because it's hard to believe he went from a Jedi who, to his credit, initially divulged to Mace Windu that Palpatine was the Sith Lord they were looking for, to a guy who slaughtered children without a second thought. And keep in mind this turn and change all happened before Padme had even died. Of course, there is what Yoda said in The Empire Strikes Back, about how once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. So perhaps, to put it simply, that first step down the dark path is a real doozy, and led to being consumed very, very quickly. There's also that fact that this comic book takes place after he has learned of Padme's death, and that the anger and hatred, mostly aimed at himself for failing her, is very fresh and new, and he's not even ready to begin to question what he's doing and why. But, then again, even though he was convinced that the Jedi were evil and that they were trying to take over, as he says to Obi-Wan during their duel in Revenge of the Sith, that doesn't exactly mean he still can't judge right from wrong and take a look at his actions and realize what he's doing. Then again, the argument could be made that, as Obi-Wan says, Vader betrayed and murdered Anakin, which means that he really isn't even Anakin anymore, but quite literally a different person, and maybe that's true from more than just a certain point of view. And nevertheless, I still think I would have liked one moment in here, just one brief moment of doubt where his mind drifted to Padme and he wondered, what in the hell am I doing? And I think one way they could have done that is to have Anakin encounter a Jedi he knew and one that had survived Order 66 instead of Kuruk. One possibility could have been Luminara, because we know she was on Kashyyyk during Order 66, but we don't know she met her fate there. We only know that the Empire has her body, as seen in Season 1 of Rebels. And I think it would have been interesting if somehow Luminara figured out who he was during their duel and made him question everything for just a fraction of a second before he killed her. And then he takes her and her saber back to Palpatine. Instead, Vader had to resort to using innocent bystanders to win and take the saber instead of truly earning it by defeating a Jedi, which to me was a little disappointing. And sure, Sith don't exactly fight fair most of the time, but this is one case where I would have preferred if they had. And you might counter and say that he was still getting used to being in the suit and he wasn't about to beat such a skilled warrior in combat. But I would then argue, if he was so consumed by anger and hate at this point, enough so that he coldly slaughtered members of the 501st and didn't even remotely question anything he was doing, he was probably strong enough with the dark side to win this fight fairly. So again, these first 4 issues were good and worth a read if you want to check them out. But I think I would have preferred if this story found its way into a novel instead, and one that explored more of Vader's psyche at this point, and just what in the hell he was going through in his mind during all this. I mean, is he just utterly consumed by hatred and rage, so much so that he's not even thinking? Or is he very much questioning how this has happened to him, and how he ended up as a Sith Lord in a mechanical suit? Hopefully, as this series goes on, we'll get at least a peek or two into the mind of Vader and begin to understand him better and why he is becoming this monster. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn. Did you read these first 4 issues and what did you think of them? Let me know in the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.